Welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow. You're watching this very special series called Leaders of Tomorrow Icons. And our icon tonight is someone who needs absolutely no introduction. I'm talking about Indra Nooyi. In this interview with Femina editor Ambika Muttoo, she speaks about all things, including how her grandfather shaped her childhood, to her mentors, to what it means to be someone who's on the list of the world's most powerful and prestigious people across the world, and how a Chennai girl went on to become a global icon. Listen in to this very interesting conversation.
Indra, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be speaking to you today.
Honest to be speaking with you too, Ambika.
Indra, I've read your book from cover to cover. And I just wanted to start with, why did this feel like the right time to reveal your story in full?
So it was an interesting evolution because I didn't start to write a book at all. I was going to write about how to lift women in the workplace, how to provide support systems so they can have a family and work. How do you give women the power of the purse? Those kinds of issues, because those are the questions that people asked me as I was in PepsiCo and leaving PepsiCo. So I was going to write a series of articles about that and sort of get a policy discussion started. And my publisher, several publishers, and my book lawyer came to see me and said, look, if you want to write about those issues, that's great. But there's credibility and readability only if you inform it through your life. People want to know about your life. People want to know how you managed it. They want to know if there's a manual for doing all this, and maybe your manual they can use. So you've got to inform it with your life story. So what ended up as a result was not a memoir per se, not a tell-all per se. It's a book filled with lessons informed by my story. And so it's not intended to just tell you, here's my story. It's to tell you what I went through, what I took from each of the stages of my life, and what I intend to do for the next phase of my life.
And another aspect that I saw very clearly in the book was the principle of honesty versus fake encouragement. And having a family that provided this principle must have shaped you in so many different ways. But how does this ethos take form when you're at the top and constantly having to communicate with people with such varied personalities?
So, Ambika, you've got to tailor your style to the times, to the environment you're in, and the kind of people you're dealing with. There are some who, if you compliment them too much, say, hey, stop it, tell me really how I did, okay? Then there are those that thrive when you compliment them and then quietly tell them what they could have done better. So I think a leader has to evolve their style constantly. I grew up in an environment where compliments were considered, taboo. It was almost like, you don't compliment people. You always tell them what they could have done better. Now, in retrospect, a compliment now and then may not have been bad. But then we had kids and cousins who complimented each other and somehow we got by. We never looked to our parents for compliments. I don't believe my father or mother or grandfather have ever complimented us. They'll read something that you wrote where you got 95 and they'll say, not a bad job, but had you done these 3 things, you might have gotten 100. Have you thought about that? So growing up in that environment, you didn't think about compliments. You just said, that's the way life is. But now as times have gone on and people want you to compliment and people want you to be positive in your feedback, you have to change with the times. And so I was a student learning how to give feedback, how to give a pat on the back, and a little tug when I needed them to do more. It was a balancing act, which, I learned over time, even with my kids, to be honest.
Sounds like my grandfather after every math exam, in particular.
I know exactly what you mean.
In particular. You've also had some wonderful mentors along the way, people like Mr. Rao or a Norman Wade, and they also mentored you relatively early in your career. And I feel that they came through for you at really fortuitous moments. So I'd just like to know how these people who have appeared at these key moments in your life have shaped your views on leadership.
I was lucky, again, talk about, being dealt a great deck of cards. Whether it's S.L. Rao, who I still keep in touch with. He's in Bangalore, and I still enjoy talking with him. Or Norman Wade, who's passed. And then, the others, Gerhard Schulmeier, Steve Reinemann. Mentors pick you, you don't pick them. And they pick you because they see something in you that they think they can work with, and you'll turn out even better than the raw material that they were given. I didn't know that these were my mentors until later. I reflected back on the profound impact they had on my life and how they pushed me to do the tough assignments, how they never really complimented me, but they never critiqued me or criticized me when they'd give others harsh feedback. So by inference, I would say that's a compliment. And so they gave me not just intellectual support, they also gave me just life support. I was telling stories about Gerhard, or even Norman Wade giving me advice to go to the States, or S.L. Rao actually coming with coffee to the visa line. These people were extraordinary men. Most of my mentors, in fact, all my mentors have been men. And I look at them and I say, I owe you a debt of gratitude.
Have there also been moments in your career, whether it was at BCG or Motorola and later at PepsiCo, where you learned the importance of a company acknowledging an individual's value?
Company cultures we should talk about, because companies are nothing but a collection of people. So it's whether the people in a company acknowledge your values. But what's the culture of the company? There are companies where the culture is impersonal, where they look at people as tools of the trade. And then there are companies that look at people as assets, real assets for the company. I think in BCG, Boston Consulting Group, I was looked at as an asset. All the people in BCG are looked at as assets because consulting is nothing but people.
True.
Then when I came to Motorola, people like Chris Galvin looked at me as an asset. He really mentored me and treasured me, and so did Gerhard. Gerhard Schulmeier was like perhaps the single biggest mentor in my life, who gave me the most tailwinds. And I worked with him for so many years, learned so much. He pushed me. He knew how to handle me, let me put it that way. And he read me. He knew when to push me. And he never once gave me a hall pass, if you want to call it that. But he was always understanding if I had a crisis or something to deal with. And then, when you come to PepsiCo, there was Wayne Calloway or Roger or Steve. Steve was a gigantic force. Again, the culture of the company was one where we treated our people very well. So when you don't really work for a company per se, you operate within a culture of a company, and that culture is manifested in certain people. So if you end up with the right boss, it's a great place to be. And I think I ended up with a great set of bosses. And of course, some would say I earned it. Whether I earned it or ended up with them, it doesn't matter. I had a great set of bosses.
I think you definitely earned it. I do. You mentioned Wayne Calloway, who was PepsiCo CEO back then. At a certain pivotal moment in your life, you found yourself between two giants, which is GE and PepsiCo. And a phone call from Mr. Calloway cemented your decision to join PepsiCo. What was it about that phone call that moved you?
This is a person who, in an interview with him, spoke for a minute and I spoke for 59. Because he was a very quiet person. He would ask one question and just sit back and let you talk.
Yes.
And here is a person who calls you and speaks for 5-10 minutes, straight, in the most humble way. And this again goes back to your previous question about culture and valuing people. It was clear to me that he was valuing me. It was clear from the way he talked, the way he committed to developing me, told me the environment at PepsiCo needed somebody like me. Together, we could make this company greater. He was making me feel part of a bigger entity that together we were going to make even greater. And it's that outreach, that humble outreach with an entreaty for me to be part of an ecosystem that I could help improve, that touched me beyond anything that I expected.
Can imagine.
The decision was simple.
I'm going to slip into a short break on that note. Back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, Icons.
When you walked into PepsiCo, that fateful day, March 30th, 1994, I believe, and you felt that it suited your spirit. The landscape, however, at the time did mirror the senior tier of corporate America.
Yep.
But here you were, deeply engaged parent, wife, and a daughter, but also somebody who was deeply cognizant of being an outsider. How did you make sense and order in the following years at PepsiCo?
First, PepsiCo is an unusual company. You walk into the company, there's a special sauce in that company. It's youthful. Everybody's smiling. There's a joie de vivre in the company. I think it's the products and the campaigns that we do that evokes that sort of a feeling in the company. So you get caught up in that right away, first. Thing number two is, when I joined PepsiCo, my immediate boss was Bob Detmer, who was the chief financial officer. Bob Detmer was a established leader in PepsiCo. He'd been there for a long time. People respected him enormously. And Bob Detmer made the company, in all the meetings that he was in, made it known that he was my mentor. He was going to look out for me. He was going to coach me, develop me. So people looked at me like, she's Detmer's hire, so let's give her the respect. And Wayne Calloway did the same thing. So now I had two bosses who were giving me all the respect, and they really knew I was going to break China and PepsiCo being so different. So they were explicitly signaling to the organization, we brought her in. And then a few months later, Roger Enrico came in, who was considered impossible to work with. And all of a sudden, he's saying, this is my person, don't mess with her. And people are going, man, she should be special. So again, you see, these people sort of provided that safety net for me to establish myself. And then once I established myself based on my work, then they could let go. But in the early days, between Detmer, Calloway, and Roger Enrico, it was a fort that they built around me and allowed me to grow and thrive and put my mark on the company. And then, of course, I was flying by myself.
Of course. When you did become CEO, though, how did you find ways to balance compassionate action and foresight with the absolute rigor that is required to make massive decisions that have very far-reaching consequences?
My belief is that people, your executives in particular, have to be engaged in the company, head, heart, and hands. Okay. Typically, people focus on the head, people focus on the hands. And I believe that increased loyalty to the company, to me, to the team, will happen if they felt emotionally committed to the company in significant ways. Emotion not derived from a paycheck, emotion derived because they believed in the company. They believed they were part of this company in more profound ways than I'm getting a paycheck. So I decided to engage their heart. I got to know them all as people. I got to know their families. I got to know their parents, started to write to parents, to the spouses. And I did that because I wanted their families to realize that their spouse or their child was part of a larger organization that had a profound impact on corporate America. And that I truly appreciated the hours that their family member was putting in PepsiCo. And just know your CEO is grateful. So when the family knew that the CEO was not just using their spouse or their child as another tool of the trade, but a genuine contributor, all of a sudden the relationship changed. And I think in a way, we all have to put empathy back in the job.
Absolutely.
And look at each individual as somebody who has got family, who's got issues, who's got joys and sadness, and, allow them to bring themselves to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not inconceivable for me to be in a meeting and find that one employee is looking absolutely glum and unusually quiet and not giving eye contact. I'll call a break, pull that person out and say, okay, tell me what's up. And they'll say, you noticed? I said, yeah, I've noticed. Tell me what's up. And then they'll tell me what's going on. And I'll tell them, take a break. Just leave, go home, or work out your issues, and I'll brief you on what happened at the meeting. Because at the end of the day, they're people too. All of us are people.
Absolutely. I think that's a rare quality, to be honest. But I'm also interested to know that you always stood by the fact that to have an economy and a society that is progressive, we have to educate women. Yeah. We have to empower them, and we have to allow them to unlock their tremendous potential. I'm kind of linking this question to everything that we've been talking about. And I'm curious to know if you feel that you've witnessed the needle move forward with this in any way.
Yes and no. I actually think from when I started to now, we've come a long way.
Okay.
The number of women in senior leadership positions has gone up. The number of women in colleges and universities and professional schools has gone up a lot. Mm-hmm. So in all of those metrics, we're making great progress.
All right.
And people are now beginning to recognize and realize that women are getting all the top grades, they're driven, they want to contribute to the economy. And if you don't bring in the talents of the women, the economy cannot thrive.
Absolutely.
At a time when right now the big issue is okay? Mm-hmm. And so I think those ways we've come a long way. Where we have not made much progress is the environment inside companies for women to work without facing unconscious bias or lack of pay parity. We still have too many headwinds on women as opposed to giving them the tailwinds to soar. And we have done nothing to build a support structure for them if they want to have a family too.
Absolutely.
I think the one thing COVID did is showed us what remote work could look like because the technology moves so fast.
True.
So COVID is the only silver lining of COVID. We now know how to do remote work. So women can now, young family builders, I shouldn't say just women, young family builders can now work the flexibility of days into the schedule. But we still haven't done much in terms of childcare. We've just said it's a problem. And in many, many families, the woman is still expected to come home and carry a full burden at home. And, we're talking about the educated parts of society, Ambika, as you well know, around the world, I think there are 137 million girls who are still not educated. And, the reason they're not educated is because society believes that these women have to perform certain jobs that don't require education. That's not true. Families are fragile. And when the family breaks up for whatever reason, what is that woman supposed to do with the kids? I don't know. And so I think we ought to think holistically about women and say, we've got to give them the power of the purse. We've got to give them the ability to keep a job, support their families. And we've got to make women equal partners in this whole economic equation.
The rules of engagement have to change. They absolutely have to. And like you said, during COVID, I think a lot of companies could see that somebody could manage actually working an entire load, taking care of themselves, taking care of the companies while being at home. Earlier, I feel that it was there was this preconceived notion that you had to kind of check in and check out into an office environment to be of use to the company. And I do think that COVID has turned it on its head. Hopefully the rules will continue to engage once the world gets back on its feet in its entirety. I hope so.
I think we can evolve new work styles, Ambika, that suit families and allow women and men, young family builders, to have a family and build a career. I think what we have to do is to make sure that families are a source of strength, not a source of stress.
All right, that's all we could manage to bring you from that very insightful, very powerful conversation. If you want to know who are all the other icons that we feature here on the show, do head on over to our website. Our details are there on your screens as we speak. For now, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.